think that every writer should have a chance to thank everyone they've ever met. Because we will use you in so many ways. Scott came over with Eileen and pointed out all the different people I've used in my book. And I have to admit it, yes, I did. No regrets. So thank you guys for all coming out here to the Riptide at the edge of the Western world. Hi, Annika. See you back there, girl. I really wanted to have the party here, not just because it was set in, there was a scene that's set kind of in this bar. I actually wrote probably 4 or 5 scenes in this bar, and one made it to the book. As any writer friends know, my book started out at over 100,000 words, and now it's like under 80. So the scene that I've written, I was just telling Layla that it is one of the hardest scenes to read. So please bear with me. I'm going to do the best I can. I don't think I need to tell you anything to kind of like set it up, except that. Talia and her best friend Toby are investigating for a PI named Porter Nepal, and they're investigating. The clue they're investigating is that the Surf Pinks, a surfing gang, threatened to kill the victim in this novel. His name is Buster Bones. All right, so I'm going to start, but if I mess up, please bear with me, because this is not an easy one. I think there's like 5 characters in it, maybe 6. All right.
Believe in you.
We believe in you.
Thank you.
I want voices.
Yes. Voices. I'm gonna try. They're all like, everybody's like, we know you're an actress.
Yes.
As the meeting drove along Golden Gate Park into the sunset and toward Ocean Beach, a thick white fog bank rolled toward them. On the beach, Talia pulled her jacket around her and stomped on the icy sand, feeling the cold through the soles of her shoes. To the right, she could see the bright, rainbow-shaped sails of the kite surfers who skated along the waves near the cliff house. Far to the left, the hang gliders were hovering in the air like seagulls over the cliffs near Daly City. Straight ahead, the plovers chased the waves as the wind whipped along the water, sending fluffy foam skittering along the sand. Check it out. Toby pointed straight ahead at something in the water. Do you think those are the pinks? Talia could only see a dark dotted line out near the horizon. I can't even tell if they're surfers or sea lions. Talia pulled out Dicko and typed, "Need to interview surfers, but they're too far out." A map appeared on the screen. A red line ran from where they stood to a spot marked with a bright yellow star a few blocks up Judah Street. They decided it would be easier to get to that yellow star on Judah than to the dotted line way out near the horizon. After a 10-minute walk, Dicko flashed the message, "You are here." They looked up at the sign, Smokey's Surf Shop. Talia checked Dicko. The screen was dark except for the words, "Rent surf equipment," in white block letters. They stepped into the cluttered little shop that was filled with racks and racks of thick black wetsuits and smelled of rubber and patchouli. The clerk hooked them both up with wetsuits and boards. He threw in a little waterproof pouch at no extra charge. "For your cell phone," he said, pointing at Dicko. They brought the gear back to the meanie and took turns changing into their wetsuits. Once Toby had stopped yelling about the indignity of wearing fetish wear in public, they plunked onto the cold sand, which was considerably warmer with the wetsuits. Dicko buzzed an alert. Talia checked it. "Oh, shit." Toby groaned. "What is that bitch telling me to do now? Do I need to vote Republican or something? I won't do it." He turned away, crossing his arms. Talia put the screen in front of his face. He read the directions out loud. "Get in the water and paddle out to the surfers." "Well, duh, Teabag. What did you think it was going to say?" "I don't know." She looked out at the dark gray, almost black water. Stand on the beach looking like a surfer until one of them comes to you? She typed the words "too scared" into Dicko. What does it say? It says, even in the middle of sheer terror, it is important to behave as manly as possible. That's a tall order for this duo. Toby put an arm around her. You don't have to do this. We can just walk to the nearest bar and ask them if they serve kinky sea lions. Talia leaned her head on his shoulder. He patted her head and said, Minnie probably did it anyway. Let's get real. Talia thought about Minnie's face when she looked at that little black box with her family in it. She stood, hitched her surfboard under her arm, and said, let's do this fucking thing. Talia ran down to the sand, took 3 steps into the water, and then ran back to dry land. This happened 3 more times before Toby put his hands on her shoulders and looked in her eyes. Look, bitch, an hour ago, you were alone in a dark alley with a gross body. If you can do that, you as sure as shit can go for a little swim. A few minutes later, she was paddling her board out past the crashing waves to a relatively calm spot where the water rolled gently beneath her. It helped to clear her mind of everything but a single mantra, a trick she'd learned in yoga class. Let's do this fucking thing. Over and over. But that was a bit too wordy, so she edited it down to paddle, paddle, paddle. When the fuck are we gonna stop fucking paddling? Toby yelled over the sound of the wind and waves. Paddle, paddle, Talia yelled back. A dark, hulking figure glided toward them. Talia peered at it, thinking, paddle, paddle, paddle. The hulking figure grew closer, revealing itself to be 3 surfers in a V formation. They crouched on their surfboard in what was either the about to catch a wave position or the kill the newbies position. The surfers advanced and hit her surfboard with a thunk. She fell into the water. For about a second, she allowed herself to think that she was going to die there in the ocean, sliced up by a motor of a passing boat. Then she started another mantra. Swim, swim, swim. Strong fingers grabbed her arm. She struggled against them but was violently pulled out of the water. She screamed, "Bitch, stop screaming!" Toby? What'd you expect, Aquaman? Toby pulled her up onto his surfboard. She looked for her board, but it was lost. She straddled the board, coughing up water and trying to catch her breath. Talia? Toby said. Yeah. Why the hell were you screaming fire just now in the water? Was I? Talia coughed. I must have. Oh, they teach you that in self-defense class because no one will come if you yell rape. Oh, how about yelling, I'm drowning, or, oh, good Lord. Toby was looking at something over her shoulder. She turned. 2 more surfers, crouched in what she now knew was the drown the newbies position, were speeding toward them. Shit! Talia grabbed Toby. Toby wrapped his arms around her. They held their ground, shaking, floating above the waves, shaking in fear and holding on to each other until Toby screamed, "Fire! Fire! Will somebody please call the fire department? I'm about to get killed by a gay surf gang. I mean, fire!" Talia buried her head in the crook of Toby's shoulder. The wave welled beneath them, and then a male voice yelled, "Hey!" right before the collision. They tumbled into the icy water. Right as she hit the water, she did something stupid. She thought about sharks. She thought about how surfers got attacked by sharks because of their slick, black wetsuits made them look like seals. Talia tried to kick her legs in the most unseal-like way possible, which was barely at all, so she began to sink at an alarming speed. She pushed all her thoughts, especially ones about sharks, out of her head with her swim, swim, swim mantra. But it was more of a swim, swim, seal, legs, swim, shark, bite, swim mantra until something clamped down on her forearm. She flailed. Whatever was clamped onto her arm pulled her out of the water. Talia collapsed onto the surfboard and kissed it. A small wave lapped over the board and into her mouth. She sputtered and coughed and was knocked off balance, nearly falling back into the water. She didn't have the strength to swim, swim, swim one more time. Her mantra would now be shark, 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 here, sharky, sharky. Careful, honey, you don't want to go back in the drink, a male voice that was not Toby's said. Not Toby's voice. Had one of the pinks saved her from drowning only to murder her on his surfboard? She looked behind her, holding one arm up defensively against the tire iron that would be poised above her head, ready to strike. Instead, she saw a slight, fair-haired man with a toothy grin and wide-set blue eyes. Sorry about the fender bender, sweetie. We'll get you two back on dry land in no time. Talia turned to the right and saw Toby draped across another surfboard, flirting with the male model who was currently paddling him back to shore. Toby waved. Hey, Teabag, this is Brent. Hi, Brent. Talia did not wave, but held onto the surfboard with both hands until they got to shore. They'd barely emerged from the water when two men rushed over to them with blankets. It was two of the surfers who'd buzzed them. They each had a pink diamond sewn a few inches above the right breast on their wetsuits. Surf pinks, she murmured. Shh, save your energy, Brent said. You'll need it to keep warm. He looked at the beach. Finally. A man ran toward them, holding a large paper bag. Don't worry, my little victims of disaster, I'm coming. That's Mario, Talia's blonde rescuer said. He's got a flair for the dramatic. Hush you. Mario sat cross-legged in the sand next to Toby. Talia saw that he also had a pink diamond on his wetsuit. Okay, I've got 2 skinny lattes, but tragically, Mario paused, inhaling sharply. They're all out of cinnamon. I know. He handed each of them a cup. What kind of coffee shop runs out of cinnamon? Oh my God, Toby said. This latte is awesome. Are you sure? It doesn't simply reek of lack of cinnamon? It's very good, Talia said, but was just glad to be alive and had no opinion on the latte other than the cup was keeping her hands warm. Mario stared at Toby. Can I ask you something? Of course. Toby held his coffee cup close to his face, inhaling the steam. Are you Toby, the flaming rock god? The one and only, baby. Toby grinned. A squeal louder than anything heard on the dance floor of the Castro Club during Pride Week went up the beach, frightening a group of plovers. I told you guys, Mario said, and then turned to Toby. We're all huge fans. Oh, good, Talia said. Then you're not going to kill us? Toby pushed open the door of the Undertow. It's actually the Riptide. The fog-muted sunlight cutting a dim swath through the darkened bar. Look, T, he pointed at the line of surfers, wetsuits pulled down to their waists, sitting at the bar. They serve sea lions here. They piled into a dark corner booth, and over a round of beers, the surf pinks told their side of Irina's story. Your rivals actually call themselves the homophobes? In San Francisco? Talia said. I know, can you believe it? None of the OB surfers have been particularly welcoming, but the homophobes have been actively and violently trying to kick the pinks off the beach for years. Steve, Talia's rescuer, pointed at a large, jagged scar that ran the length of his forearm. One of those beasts gave me this. Mario shrugged. We didn't know who Buster Bones was, but he was a dead ringer for one of the leaders of the homophobes. I blame myself, but it really wasn't my fault. How am I supposed to know what Buster Bones looks like? Steve pointed at Mario. Now, if Cher decided to go surfing, oh, that would be fabulous. Mario grabbed Steve's index finger and shook it back and forth. Do you think Bob Mackie would design her wetsuit? See, this is why you need to educate yourself about classic rock. Toby shook his head. Cher is not going to go surfing. She is not even going to button her own fringe jacket. Brent tapped Toby on the arm. I know about classic rock. Remind me to show you my Van Halen tattoo sometime. Talia took a sip of her beer and put the glass on the table with a clunk. I heard that Buster Bones changed his mind about the pink spell. When was that? When we saved his life. Brent leaned back and casually put a hand on Toby's shoulder. Like with you two today, only then it wasn't our fault. Steve leaned toward Talia. Sorry again about that. We feel just awful. You two were all hunkered down like a couple of sea lions. Mario leaned toward her, both hands gripping the edge of the table. We didn't see you until we were on top of you, and then we came back to see if you were okay. We expected you to be paddling, but you weren't, so we miscalculated it. Oh, it was all so horrible. He threw his hands to his face. It's okay, Mario. We shouldn't have even been out there. We're noobs. Talia patted his arm and turned to Brent. You were saying you saved Buster's life? Brent nodded and took a sip of his beer, slipping his arm around Toby's back. He was a good surfer. He had to be to surf here. Ocean Beach is brutal. You two saw that firsthand. But on this particular day, Buster was out in conditions that even scared us, and we aren't easily scared. It was crazy that anyone was out there, Steve said. The sets were coming in double overhead. He wiped out. His board landed right on top of him. Brent slapped the table, and then a wave pulled him under and just beat the crap out of him. He was dead meat if we didn't help him. Homophobe or not, we weren't going to let him die. We got to him and got him to shore. His shoulder was banged up pretty good, so we put him in the back of Mario's PT Cruiser and drove to the hospital. On the way, he calls his private doctor, and this guy meets us at the door and whisks Buster inside, past reception. That was when we realized he was no homophobe. Mario raised his eyebrows. He was a rock star with some very expensive medical care. Fat load of good it did him. Steve leaned back and put his hands behind his head. He sucked as a surfer after that. What do you mean, Talia said. Steve shrugged. I don't know. He just wasn't as good as he... Talia? A male voice called from the front of the bar. Talia squinted into the gloom, tried to make out the dark form walking toward her. There you are. Thank fucking Vishnu. Ted leaned on the table in an overly dramatic show of relief. Well, hello, tall, dark, and super duper sexy. Mario scooted closer to him. I just love a man in glasses. Ted grinned. These old things, he said, adjusting his black-rimmed glasses. I just wear them so no one knows I'm Superman. Ted, how did you know where I was? Dicko sent us a distress signal. He pointed at the waterproof pouch still hanging from her neck. I installed it with a sensor that knows when it's been knocked around or been underwater too long. But it was in a surf pouch, Talia said. Doesn't matter. Measures pressure as well as moisture. Ooh, he's as smart as he looks. Please tell me you're not straight, Clark. Mario rested his chin in his palm and gazed up at Ted. To the bone, sweetie. Ted held up his arms, showing off his wiry Doctor Who t-shirt-clad body. Mario clutched his chest. Tease. Talia picked up her beer, but clunked it back down without taking a sip. Ted, you said us. Did Port ask you to come here? Ted picked up her beer and sipped. When Dicko sent out the distress signal, I turned on the mic. Port heard you screaming about sharks and fire and stuff. He panicked. He panicked? Talia stood up and ran out of the bar. Once on the sidewalk, she blinked in the fog-filtered sunlight. She shielded her eyes with her hand and scanned the street for the handicap van with the prayer flags in the back window. She stopped at the Interceptor on the other side of Terraville. She looked behind her at Ted, who was walking out of the bar. Oh, you got it fixed. Huh? Oh, no, not exactly. It's got sort of a Fred Flintstone system of braking. You used your feet? Talia pointed at his dusty black boots that were so scuffed in the front, the leather curled back in long, scraggly strips. And ruin my docks? Hardly. Coasting, shifting into neutral, and then park. He rubbed the back of his head. I avoided the bigger hills. What's so important that you drove all the way here without brakes? Ted put his hands on her shoulders and looked in her eyes. Look, I know how the guy feels. If I heard Darla being drowned or set on fire or whatever the hell happened to you, I'd go nuts. Get this, Gidget, he thought you were toast. Crazy or not, dudes are dudes. We need to protect our women, even if they aren't technically our women, and even if we have to do something that they don't like, what are you talking about, Ted? I guess I'm saying you're fired, Ted sighed. Sorry, kid. I need to take Dicko. Her hand shook as she pulled the little black device from the waterproof pouch. She began to hand it to him, but stopped. Maybe it was the dudes or dudes crap or the fact that he called her Gidget. She bent her elbow and held Dicko at her shoulder. Bullshit! Less than a month ago, I was so afraid of even being in ankle-deep water that a guy who never leaves his house had to leave his house to save me. And today, I paddled the fuck out into cold, deep, and probably extremely sharky water, and yes, I screamed. Because I'm afraid of water, obviously. But I still did my job, didn't I? Yeah, but it's just, I bet if it had been Toby out there screaming, you would think it was funny, right? Ted started to laugh. Well, sure, that would be whole. He looked at Talia and stopped laughing. But I see now how wrong that is. She tossed Dicko at him and walked toward the Muni stop. Right on, Billie Jean, Ted yelled. Fair is fair.
Nice.
She stopped, spun around on her heel, walked back to Ted, snatched Dicko out of his hand and said, screw that. He's gonna have to fire me to my face. Hey, Talia, do you want to ride? Ted called at her as she walked toward the L, winding slowly up the block, the single headlight cutting the fog. She put one hand behind her and held up a middle finger. Thank you guys so much for coming and listening and giving that applause. Also, I'm going to be with my hype man, John Bailey.
Oh, yeah!
Is going to be selling some more books.
Go get 'em.
You can want to buy them. And I'm also signing. If you're not buying today, there are lots available online. Just hit me up. I'll tell you where they are. Also, if you guys are having a good time drinking, a little later they're going to have bingo here. So drinking and bingo. And even later they're going to have a band called the Nickel Slot. So books, bingo, and bands. So what else do you need? All right, thank you guys.